And today I have 3 books for you to welcome spring back into your lives. What does this mean? Well, it's mainly about books that have a theme of rebirth, of growth, and I think they are perfect to read in these months that are a bit transitional. And there are 3 very different books that I completely loved, and I think that you might love as well. So let's get into those. The first one is called The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. It's quite a recent release. I think it released just about a year ago, and I read it about a month and a half ago, I think, and I really, really liked it. So if you're into the kind of cottagecore, the stakes are not too high type of vibe, and that is what you're looking for, then The Honey Witch is a perfect option for you. It talks about 21-year-old Marigold, who has always felt a bit different than the rest of her family. This is a historical novel with a bit of magic and a magical twist. So we do have a homonormative society. So even though it's a historical fiction, you will see a lot of queer couples and a lot of acceptance for queer couples. And as I was saying, Marigold has never quite fitted in with what her mother's expectations were for her, marriage and kids, and kind of a straightforward path of her life. And until one day when her grandma comes back after a lot of years that Marigold has not seen her. And her grandma basically tells her that she is the rightful heir to Innisfree. And Innisfree is a little place off the coast. Basically, imagine like the most idyllic place that you can ever think of. And that her grandma at the moment is the only honey witch left, and Marigold is supposed to take her place. And so we're basically transported into this idyllic place on Earth where Marigold has to learn to be a honey witch. And as I said, the stakes are not very high in the sense that there's a bit of a looming disaster there, but it's something that gets resolved quite quickly, so you're not going to have to be tense the whole time. So if you like that cottagecore vibe, you want to get your teeth into something that's really sweet and has a lot of flowers around, a lot of happiness and joy and personal growth, then I think The Honey Witch is the book for you for the spring. The second book that I wanted to talk to you about is actually a young adult book. Now, don't just dismiss young adult books, because I actually think that they are such a huge source of healing for a lot of queer people, especially like in their late 20s and in their 30s, especially if they've had a hard time coming out or dealing with their queerness when they were younger. That is simply because obviously young adult books are geared towards young adults, towards queer people and just people in high school and just kind of trying to find their footing out there. And a lot of these amazing young adult authors out there are doing such an amazing job at actually talking about queer joy as teenagers and how the world has changed in the acceptance. And so this novel that I absolutely loved a couple years ago when I read it is called Ophelia Ever After by Raquel Marie. And this is basically about a teenage girl called Ophelia who is obsessed with flowers and seemingly obsessed with boys. Everybody around her makes fun of her for her endless stream of crushes, all boys. And so when she starts feeling something for a female acquaintance of her, Talia, then basically her entire identity crumbles around her. So when I started this video, I said that these books had in common a theme of rebirth, of growth, and this is exactly what we see here. And I think this is what and why it resonated so much with a lot of adults, a lot of queer people, because Ophelia is awakened to the possibility of having these feelings. And it's just so great to see in this type of literature. I just really loved it, and I saw myself in it quite a lot. It is. So It's an overall really lovely book that I highly recommend for you this spring. Last but not least, I have a poetry collection. I did tell you that these were totally different books that I was going to recommend, and this is actually a collection of queer poetry. So this is All the Flowers Kneeling by Paul Tran, and this is absolutely gorgeous. It's quite a tough read because it does delve into topics such as racial issues and homophobia, and a lot of topics that are really hard to reckon with. But it is ultimately about rebirth and about growth and how to reconcile different sides of your experiences together. So there are trigger warnings for this book, especially this collection, but it's something that is so lovely and so valuable to read about. And I actually think that poetry does such wonders for the soul, because I know that when we all go back to reading the same books that we love multiple times, we find different things. It is even more of an occurrence when you go back and read poetry. There's one specific book of poetry that I think about all the time. And every time that I reread it, because I've reread it multiple times a year since I was 16 and I'm 27 today, I always discover new things. And so All the Kneeling Flowers, which is a gorgeous title, by the way, it's also a very great poetry collection that came out in 2022. It talks about colonialism, it talks about racial issues, it talks about queerness, and it's quite tough to read, but still very beautiful. And so these were my top 3 picks for books that I think that you should get to. And so this is what I'm leaving you with today, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!